right, we have with us today Michael Stone. Mike is an incredible drummer from the San Diego area. Mike, thanks so much for joining us to do an interview today. I just think you're like a musical hero in my heart, to tell you the truth.
For having me, and thank you for such nice words. That's
Well, you've done such incredible things. I've gotten to know, and I'm sorry to be here just talking. I want you to be the center of the show, but I've gotten to know Mike here and there over many years, and have watched Mike and his career just advance from part-time hobby to riding that careful line of how do I balance these two things, and now Mike is like full-time drummer and just living the dream, as they say. And it's been such an incredible thing to watch, Mike. You're an amazing drummer, and the reason we're here is to talk about your Primus audition. You are one of the very few people to actually get an in-person Primus audition. So thank you for coming. I'll shut up now. You tell your story.
oh well. I mean, thank you so much. This is this whole experience was kind of surreal. I mean, I've been following Primus since probably 1989. I've seen them multiple times. I've gotten to meet Les a few times. The first time I met him was way back in, I want to say, 92 or 93 when I saw him with the Holy Mackerel, and I made a complete ass of myself when I met him because I completely gushed. I was fresh out of Wyoming. I had just moved to California, and Primus was such a game changer for me, and of course Les was such a game changer for me that when I met him, I did one of those full on like, dude, you're amazing, dude. Like I could see the immediate panic on his face, like, oh shit, get me back on the bus. But um, anyway, I mean that kind of helps shape how I react to to musicians I admire down the road. Anyway, been following him for decades, really, and I've always loved playing along with Primus stuff. Never really got the chance to play any of that music with anybody except I met one bass player at some point he had just picked up bass because of Primus.
Wow.
He's attempting to do Les Claypool bass lines and with no training whatsoever, and we couldn't find anybody locally to give him any training. So, I'd get together with him and we would just, hash out stuff for fun. So it was just him on bass and vocals and me on drums, and I already knew a ton of Primus stuff, and he was just kind of fumbling his way through, and it was fun, but it was like not something that went anywhere. So to actually, get the opportunity to audition in person it was just wild. Leading up to it, I was full of all kinds of self-doubt, and even when you play along with somebody for the longest time, you study the music, you know the music in and out, and then you get the chance to go, okay, we're going to actually get a chance to sit in the same room and make noise. That's a completely different equation. So, um, and plus, knowing how many people were applying for this uh, was wild. And I saw so many drummers that I admire greatly were sending in video applications, and I was just automatically like comparing myself to all these players. Like, Tobias Ralph did a great well, he did a few videos that he
He
sent in.
did.
I thought
He
for
did.
sure he would have been a great fit to try out, but he didn't get it. I saw Danny Walker of Intronaut and Job for a Cowboy and Phobia and like a ton of he's just a monster player. He's one of my favorite metal guys, and he submitted a really good video that didn't get him in. Elliot Hoffman of Car Bomb was submitting um, videos, and I'm like, there's no way I can compete with this guy. No freaking way. He didn't get through. I'm like, oh my god. I was filming for weeks trying to get footage that I'd be happy with to send in. And finally I was just like, look, just put together a video of lots of snippets. So there's the video in total has about 6 snippets, and there's only one bit on it where I'm actually playing any Primus stuff, and it's just the drums, no backing. Um, and I sent it, and I felt like, okay, well, I I shot my shot. I don't know that I could possibly, even get their attention with this. Um, I do have a friend inside the camp. Their drum tech I've known forever, and he had thrown my name in the hat like immediately. But still, even with that, I had to prove myself. Like I couldn't just go, hey, yeah, he said I'm pretty good, so you guys got to give me a chance. No, I had to submit just like everybody else. I mean, and so I sent my video, and it was like a day or two later. My guy was the one, my friend Tim Soya. He was the one that was reviewing all of the videos before they would go on to the next level and actually get seen by Les and Larry. And when he sent mine through, I got a response in like 20 minutes. Like 20 minutes later, I'm getting a message. It's like you're coming to the next level, man. I was just like, my wife and I were bouncing off the walls in the house here, like just absolutely beside ourselves. Like I honestly didn't think I was gonna get a chance to do it. I mean, I knew my name had been thrown in the hat, but at the same time, I felt there's just, I mean, there's so many amazing players. How can I compete with these people? There's a great lesson in that, though, and the lesson is, this is art. Don't be comparing yourself to other artists. That is completely the opposite of productive. Like the second I start, if I tried to compare myself to any of the other players that were auditioning for this, I wouldn't feel like I stack up. Like Thomas Pridgeon, I can't do what he does. Thomas Lang, I can't do what he does. Gergo Borlai, no way. Um, freaking Nikki Glaspie has played with Snarky Puppy. I mean, good Lord. Like I can't compete with that, but that's, that's the thing is they heard something in what I sound like and said, okay, we want to try that out. So getting to the next level did erase a lot of that self-doubt. Like that was an immediate, like, hey, you can freaking do this. We can, this is definitely a possibility. Um,
Well, I
even
would
even
add that Thomas Lang and Thomas Pridgeon and all these guys, they can't do what you do either. And that's what I love. It's not about like prowess, it's not about how fast you can hit and how
Yeah,
precise and on time. It's what you're bringing creatively. And actually, that's something I really appreciated about this whole Primus drum audition process, that it could have been just the star-studded cast,
yeah,
but they picked people who were just genuinely talented, regardless of their, fame, so to
yeah.
speak. So like, what do you think? I just like I'll put you on the spot. What do you think that they saw in what you brought? Uh, because when I watched your video, I mean, I've just been a fan of your drumming for a long time, and we recorded a couple of songs together, I believe, years ago. But like, I think you bring a very creative and artistic uh, approach to drumming, and you have chops, but like when to use them. But I'm curious to hear, when you got that notice, and as you thought about it, processed it, what do you think you brought that attracted them and made them say, yeah, this is one of the guys?
Um, Well, I will say that, while we were in the process, while we were doing the audition, Les said several times he really liked what I was doing with the hi-hats. I think that was a big part of my draw in getting to that level. And interestingly enough, I worked with Secret Chiefs 3 with Trace Bruins uh, in 2023. And when he first reached out to me, that was the first thing he said was like, you may be wondering why am I reaching out to you when I've got all these other drummers? I mean, he's got Kenny Grahowski and Ches Smith and Pageman Korechian and um, well, Danny Heifetz, obviously. But he's worked with all these guys, and he touring with Dave Lombardo, and he's like suddenly reaching out to me, and I'm like, beside myself. And he said, you might be asking yourself, what is it? And it's, I really love what you do with your hi-hats. And I think I'm starting to feel like maybe that's my real signature thing is how I use the hi-hats. I have been very with my students teaching drumming. I do put a lot of focus on the hi-hats because in my opinion, it's the most expressive part of the drum set. I mean, there's so many nuances and so many different ways that you can get sounds and textures and patterns out of the hi-hats that I feel like that is the most expressive part of the kit. So, maybe that's really what my biggest strength is being able to really groove and still put a lot of articulation and some interesting things that aren't necessarily taking the spotlight, but they're adding a lot. They're still fitting within whatever the context of the song is. That seems to be one of my strengths, and I think that was one thing. The other thing is I'm very much a listener on stage, in a session, no matter what. That's extremely important to me, is to be listening not just to the other musicians, but listening to myself in the context of a listener, not a player, because it is so easy to get wrapped up in the idea of, um, wow, this is such a badass thing that I'm doing, or, look at how cool this fill is. And you can get too wrapped up in that and miss that it's not fitting, because if you're so wrapped up in, man, that part is cool. It's happened to me before. Like I have a studio session that I did decades ago at this point, where I was stuck on one song, one fill in one song that I had been doing the same way for 6 months that we were writing this album. And then we got into the studio, and every time I would get to that one fill, it just was falling flat. And I'm thinking, why can't I nail this? And every other track that we were doing, I was getting in like one or two takes, and then here we were on like the 20th take of this damn song, and I was just being derailed by it. And the engineer finally was like, hey, why don't we move on to another song? We'll come back to that one tomorrow. Just give it a rest. You're hitting the wall on that one. So I went home that night and thought about it and was like, "Well, okay, I'm just going to try something different there." So I went back in, and like first or second take, doing something different there was like perfect. It fit perfect. And what I realized there was, I was so wrapped up in how cool the fill was that I really didn't notice until I was forced to be the listener that it was the wrong part. I was trying to force a square peg into a round hole. And that's a lesson that's really stuck with me, because it's like, I mean, when you keep hitting the same wall over and over again, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I'm a problem solver, so I'm going to try and find a way around something, or examine it and go, maybe that's just not right.
Yeah,
Um,
I think, as you know, I spent a long time learning that King Crimson song called Fracture. And one of the quotes that really stuck with me was from Vince Lombardi, who's a football coach. And he says, practice doesn't make perfect, perfect practice makes perfect. And I think in the context of music, it's so easy to just train ourselves on the mistakes and on the things that we think would be cool, so we practice like a thing that's not appropriate or right, and then we get into the habit, whether it's on the guitar or drums or singing or whatever. It's like you just habituate your mistakes. And
yeah,
I think perfect practice makes perfect is the way we need to is where we need to aspire to, but man, it's really hard to figure out what that is. But I just wanted to add one more thing. um when I play drums, I think of you all the time because you had a video where you put a tambourine on the I just play drums. I don't know what they are, you know? So I have drums, but there's the rod that comes out of the middle of the hi-hat and you like mounted a tambourine on there and I'll never forget that to me it was like hearing a whole new instrument and just the way you were controlling it with your left foot. Honestly, like when I'm playing the drums, I think of two people with the hi-hat, you and Bill Bruford,
Oh
because
wow.
his work on like Beelzebub and a bunch of other songs, just you guys are the most inspiring hi-hat players. So I'm glad, I always thought I felt a little silly thinking of like, well, Mike Stone is such a great hi-hat player, but like to hear other musicians see this same thing, I think that's awesome because you really are gifted with it and it is such a crucial part of playing. And that's what makes like the original King Crimson Discipline album so interesting that Fripp
Right.
told Bruford not to use a hi-hat and
Mm.
different constraints, but he's such a great hat player as well. Anyway, I'll shut up. You keep going. Tell us about the audition experience. Like you show up and then what?
Well, showed up about an hour before the actual time for the audition, which was what was requested because they had a kit there, and they wanted to give us all time to set it up the way we liked each individual auditioner. And so I brought a bunch of my cymbals. I brought my snare drum, my pedals, and you know, got there, got my stuff in. They did a quick interview with me before, like while we were setting up. The one of the cameramen was just asking me, questions as we were setting up, and then they just, it was very staged, like it was a shoot for sure. Um, so it basically got set up, got interviewed, got everything set up as close to as I wanted as possible, and then Les and Larry come walking through the walking through the door, and I'm like, wow, that's here it is. They they came in and we were having some small talk, just talking about background and Les was putting some super glue on his fingers. I guess he always does that. I've during this whole process, I was practicing so much. I was doing like, between 4 and 6 hours at a clip on my acoustic kit down at my lesson studio because I really needed to be playing that on acoustics. I mean, it's just not the same doing it on the electronic. As much as I love this kit, it's not the same as having real octobans and a real rototom and proper quirky splash cymbals, and I had all kinds of effects going on that. So I was practicing like mad, and it was like splitting my skin from all that. So I was taking to like taping him up. Anyway, that's an aside. um we were just making small talk, and then Les just started playing. He just started improvising something, and I just jumped in, and so we did some improv for a couple of prolonged things, which I didn't feel quite warmed up, but it still felt good. But there was a couple of things I needed to adjust, like the ride cymbal at one point in between the two um, improv sessions. But that, I mean, that by itself, that's wild to be, you know, just slinging ideas back and forth with Primus was, I was just kind of giddy inside, doing that. And in between songs, he remarked about the hi hat playing. He was like, "I really like what you're doing with the hats there," and it's that's super validating. Larry seems super mellow. Like they were both very easygoing, but I kind of got the impression that Les might be a little more standoffish. But I also, I kind of understand why, because having personally gushed at him at one point myself, and I'm sure he runs into that all the time. Like I saw him with Duo de Twang once, which is just him and Brian Kehoe at Belly Up, where I play a ton. I'm at that club all the time. And we were up in the balcony, and there was a guy next to me that he was like, like Patrick Starfish, like up there screaming and yelling and with this just goofy laugh and pounding on the banister the whole time. I thought he was going to break his freaking hands. And he just kept yelling over and over again, "What would Tommy say? What would Tommy say?" And finally, at one point, Les like looked up at the balcony. He's like, "Take it easy, man. Well, we're gonna play what we're gonna play. Just relax, you know." So I mean, I think he runs into that kind of a personality all the time. So he's probably like braced for impact every time he meets somebody new.
Mm.
Once once we got warmed up, he seemed really warm and but yeah, I could see where he's like, all right, what's this guy about, and Larry was much more just kind of easygoing and mellow. So anyway, we did two long improvs, and then he was like, all right, let's do some actual songs, and so we did 4 or 5 songs. um we were given a list. um and since all this is going to be out on video, I don't want to spoil it. So because they're putting all this out on their YouTube, so I'm not going to say what songs we did. Because all that they are going to be putting out like documentary style with all the people that auditioned. So um
Do you know if everyone played the same songs or you were each given your own separate list?
we were given a list of it's a short list of songs, which is great, because I prior to that I was like studying everything, like just
Mm.
inhale all the Primus. And when they finally sent out a list, it was like, okay, now I can actually focus. And so there were yeah, 5 selections in total, actually 7, but out of 2 of the selections, you were given a choice between 2 songs. So it was like 3 for sure, and then um, 2 more selections where you had a choice between this song or that song.
Mm.
Um, so everybody had a relatively same, but I'm sure somebody picked, out of the 2 that we were allowed a choice, that somebody picked something different.
You were
Um,
day 2 or 3, right? And this was
Day
like
2.
a week long thing. You were day
That was
two,
5 days, 5 days total. So they
and
had
then I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
the first day was Thomas Pridgeon and Stan Bicknell. No, not Stan, no. First day was Thomas Pridgeon and Rory Donald Dolan. Sorry. I've been in communication with Rory quite a bit. He's a super nice guy. He just had twins too. While all of this was going
Oh
on,
man.
his partner had twins. So imagine having that go on at the same time as auditioning for Primus.
And then you
His
were who was with
was
you on
on.
day 2?
Stan Bicknell was after me, and he flew all the way from New Zealand to come for this. So I mean, that's really something. Then day 3, I think all they had. No, day 3 was Sam Groveman and Nikki Glaspie um, and I think John Hoffman's on day 3 also, and then day 4 I think they just did Gergo. Then day 5 was Thomas Lang, and then they brought in Stuart Copeland and Danny Carey and oh, Bob Odenkirk of all people, and um, freaking Fred Armisen dressed up as Jens Hanneman, uh,
Wow.
and Maynard Keenan from Tool. So there's going to be like a celebrity listening panel. So I think that's going to be part of the documentary thing.
Okay, because I saw that there was this suite of people, but I didn't see them on any of the other days, and I wasn't sure if like you had to, if Danny Carey is sitting there in the background and you're, in addition to just performing, with Primus, you've got this roster of people who are like judging your performance. So no additional people there to
Nope.
make you nervous or anything.
No, just crew was there when I was there. So it was just basically I was there with Primus and my friend Tim, who was their drum tech since like 1989, and their sound crew and the management, and that was it. So
Okay.
really, I mean, when we were rehearsing, I was just kind of in my own little world, and everybody had backed like way back to the other side of the room, and there was a little control room off to the side too. So
So how did you
um,
feel about your set of Primus songs? Like, did everything go according to plan, or were there any
it felt
curveballs, or
great.
what?
Um, well, every one of the songs had improv sections in them, so that was again, more improv. That was super fun. There were a couple of times during the actual song portion where I got just so into it and was just in the moment, and look up and it's like, holy shit, that's them. This is literally happening, you know. But I feel like I nailed the material. They said I nailed the material as well. So, you know, and in hindsight, I don't know. Were they looking for me to nail it, or were they looking for me to, I was trying to still be myself while representing, the previous players. So, but I felt really good about my performance. Um, Tempos were great. I've gotten really good over the last like 6 years, especially with tempo memory, because with my dance band, I use click track constantly. So it's really kind of alarming how good you can build that muscle memory of tempo memory. So it's I can start a song, like there are certain songs that I know what tempo it is, and it only feels right exactly at that tempo. And even if let's say I miss the button on the metronome on that particular song, if I start it anyway, by the time I get the metronome, it's like, yes, the metronome is right with me, you know. So
Yeah.
my tempo control is really good at this point. So it just kills me to see all these drummers out there that are like, I don't need a click. The tempo is what I say it is. I'm like, okay, I bet it isn't. you know, but I mean, this is why I get work is
Right.
is because I can keep it, I can keep it freaking solid and add some flavor on top of it. But so that felt really good. Um, I really enjoyed the songs that we did. They were some of my absolute favorites. So, getting to do those. I mean, we're talking about songs that I've played for my own enjoyment over the years,
Mhm.
and to actually get to play them with the band was like just amazing. That was so cathartic, and just like, I mean, I could feel my adrenaline going. It just felt so good. Like I'm sure I'm probably grinning ear to ear in the video, but we'll see.
And then what about afterward? That there had to be a huge pressure letdown, although maybe you were nervous just waiting to find out the results. You know, what happens? You finish the song, you shake their hands, and then you go home?
Well, it was basically we did some photos real quick of just all of us standing right in front of the kit that I had just used, and then Les and Lair bid farewell, and they went into another room, and then they brought two more cameras in, and proceeded to interview me there and ask me how I thought it went, and what do I think I can bring to Primus, and how did that feel, and just a bunch of follow up after the fact questions. So that'll be interesting to see as well. And
And
it's just pack up and get out of the way because next guy's coming in. And as I was driving out of the facility, it was really nice. It was uh, uh, Third Encore in Burbank. So it's basically a horseshoe shaped complex of warehouse buildings that are all sound stages. And so as I'm pulling out, I could see Stan walking in, and yeah, so quite a trip. And then driving home, I had, of course, my wife wanted to know what was going on. I had a couple of very close friends you know that were just dying for details, and so I've been pretty tight-lipped on a lot of the details because I know they're doing the video, and I didn't want to sabotage myself, even though I'm not superstitious. I don't want to sabotage myself with any predictions or any of that sort of thing. So, um, yeah, it was
That's
just about sharing experience with loved ones, and you know, that was pretty much it. I had a nice long drive home where I can't remember what I was listening to, but I listened to something else because I had been just so immersed in Primus for like I was working on that for something like, I don't know, 15 or 18 weeks
wow.
in total. And so yeah, I
Man,
had
well, congratulations, because I mean, this is like, fantasy level what if,
literally,
when you're a teenager. I've had a few of these moments myself, and I'm not trying to make it about me. It's just like I, I got to play with a couple of heroes of my own, like from Gentle Giant, and I remember I'm playing chords and I look up and it's like there's Gary Green from Gentle Giant on the stage with me, and I look over, there's Malcolm Mortimer, the drummer for Gentle Giant, and you're
yeah,
just like, how did I get here? It's like the Talking Heads song, like you
yeah,
wake up and how did this happen? How did I end up in this life? I'm so happy for you, and I'm really, really proud of you. And I know that, like, no matter what, you deserve the audition. Of all the international drummers in the world, I know what they've meant to you, what Primus has meant to you, and it's
yeah.
so, so cool to hear you go through this.
Well, thank you. I mean, and of course, I was bummed that I didn't get it. Um, but at the same time, it's like there's nothing but positives out of this whole thing. I mean,
Right.
this is elevating my visibility on the world stage. It was incredibly inspiring, and I learned a few things about myself as far as, like, we talked about, don't compare yourself to other artists, because that is, it's just counterproductive. It's like you have your flavor, assuming that you've developed any kind of a voice over, however long you've been playing your instrument. That is your voice and your voice alone. So, comparing yourself to somebody who you view as dramatically more capable or um, more accomplished is like, what's the point in that other than self-sabotage? So that's something that I think I'm going to have a lot better control over in the future. And it made me focus on a lot of things, playing style, technique wise, that I'm now noticing in my other working situations, where I'm like, whoa, I didn't know I could do that. Or, here's a different way to apply that thing that I was just using, that is now like finding new life elsewhere. Um, and I feel like, pretty sure that this is going to lead to other opportunities, especially,
Oh yeah.
once this video comes out. That was part of their, when they announced to all the auditioners who actually got the gig. They did say, look, you were all more than qualified for this. We just had to pick who fit the best, and they said, look, when this video comes out, you're all going to be represented in very good light. So I really only see positives coming out of this. Uh, I, 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 it's like I feel opportunities are going to be coming soon. So,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's
mm,
funny. I remember when Dream Theater was trying out different
mm,
drummers, and some people were frustrated because it was like the Mike Mangini footage was higher quality than all the other footage, but they had all these incredible drummers like Marco Miniman, and uh, it definitely put these people, these unknowns on the map. And uh, not getting a gig can be just as good as getting a gig. But also, congrats to John Hoffman. I didn't know who he was. And then I watched his audition video, and holy cow, the guy is a great player. And
really,
he's so fun and funny. And it sounded like you had already known John.
not
You know,
really. No, I
oh,
was just familiar with him because of, I'm so into, like, drum streams, and I'm, a social media addict. So, I'm constantly seeing other drummers. I had subscribed to, if a drummer's good, or if they're at least interesting, then I've probably subscribed to him on some platform, you know. So I
Mhm.
had definitely seen him out there, and he was making really good content, and he was clearly a player. So you know, I was familiar with him in that. One of the other uh, uh, one of the other auditioners, Sam Groveman, I thought he was actually one of the more likely candidates because he's got such he would be like a different approach, and that's something with Primus is what they've, you know, Jay Lane, Tim Alexander, and Brain are all drastically different approaches. I would say, you know, Jay Lane and Tim Alexander are kind of similar in some ways, but they really have overall their feels are still completely different. So I could see, you know, Sam Groveman. I thought honestly, out of all the candidates, I thought myself, but I'm biased. Um, Sam Groveman or Rory were the three best like choices as far as fit went. So, um, but you know, I was glad to see that they got somebody who was a relative unknown.
Yeah.
Um, as amazing as the other players are, you know, I can't imagine what they would sound like with Thomas Pridgeon, although we're going to find out, you know. And
What once I saw Gergo Borlai, I was like, "Oh, he's in. That's it." You know, Gergo
yeah,
is like such a monstrous player, and I was like, "How could you not go with him?" You know, and it felt like just as a fan of Primus and watching from the sidelines and
yeah,
knowing that you had your audition, I was like, "That's so unfair. How can they bring in Gergo Borlai?"
yeah,
Because he's just such a beast. But yeah, it gets into that like the competitive aspect, and I'm really glad that John got it. Not glad that you didn't get it. But
yeah,
after watching his video and him playing with the Saturday morning cartoon music and just his attitude and approach, it was like this makes sense. You know,
yeah.
he's awesome. He's going to be a
He's
great
great.
fit. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I wanted to also cover your Secret Chiefs 3 track. Uh, I just picked it up on Bandcamp, and I thought we could take a listen to some of it. Is that cool?
sure.
All
Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
let me pull it up.
Another bucket list item for me was getting to work with him.
Yeah,
So,
tell us the story there. Like, how do you end up with Secret Chiefs 3?
um, well, I've seen that band probably more than any other band that I've seen. You know, I've seen Mr. Bungle a few times. Mr. Bungle was a huge game changer for me. I mean, that was when I first moved to California. Is when the self-titled album was just making the rounds, and I was just like blown away. I've worn out like 5 copies of their, you know, of their self-titled, um, and then, you know, Disco Volante, which is that's my all-time favorite album.
Incredible, incredible,
So dynamic and with so many different genres just mashed together, and it's still like every when I listen to it, I'm still like learning new things every time I hear it. So um, when in like '99, when first became aware of Secret Chiefs 3, you know, it was much more of you know, in this kind of vein of Disco Volante, the stuff that they were putting out. And I just, you know, I saw them as many times as I got the opportunity. If they were anywhere near, if they were in San Diego or LA, I was going to see it. And over time, I started kind of making friends with people like Jason Schimmel, also from Stratosphere, and you know, he's been in several iterations of Secret Chiefs 3. And so, you know, this is the importance of networking, you know, getting to know people. And you know, at one point, you know, Jason sent me a text that because they were playing in San Diego, and he's like, hey, you know, we kind of need a place to stay instead. You know, some of us are going to go back to LA, but you know, Trey wants a place to stay, you know, in San Diego overnight instead of, you know, just, you know, driving right after the show. And um, so we offered him, you know, to stay with us. So it was you know, Trey and Pageman and their front of house guy, Steve Goldberg, who's also guitarist for Cephalic Carnage. Um, they all stayed with me overnight, and then you know, my friend Carl came down and did a podcast episode there with Trey. and that kind of got, got me on the radar, I think, with Trey, and that was in 2017.
Mm.
And then, of course, I saw them several times since then, and it was literally I was at the grocery store one day after work, and I saw that I had a message on Facebook Messenger. I opened it up, and it was Trey Spruance asking if I was interested in tracking music for Secret Chiefs 3. And I literally almost cried right there in the freaking grocery store. So yeah, that he ended up sending me a ton of demos, and I was woodshedding on those demos for almost a year before we got into the studio. The track that you've got queued up now happened in like a 2 week period. It was for a tribute to Sun Ra for redhot.org. And It's an interpretation of a Sun Ra song called Love in Outer Space. And that was just basically, he threw me a rough demo. I took that to a friend's studio and, brought my acoustic kit and all my mics, got that set up and did a 1 day session and sent him like 8 takes of the song as far as the drums are. And so that's that track, but there's still another, I want to say 9 tracks that I did with them that it's just not out yet. I don't know when it's going to be out, but there's more to come there.
Yeah, it's funny. I met just total happenstance. I met Trey at a Free Salamander exhibit show,
Mm.
and I didn't know he lives in Arizona now. So I was like, "What the heck is Trey Spruance doing here?" And then I went up to him and I said, "Hey, my friend Mike Stone has played for you, and my friend Adam Minkoff plays in Secret Chiefs 3. And we've had Adam on the channel a couple of times. He's a huge Gentle Giant fan. Uh, and then Trey is like, "Oh, you're the Gentle Giant weird music guy. You got him." And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah, Mike worked forever on our drum parts. I think I melted his brain or something. It was like these parts were so
Totally.
challenging for him, and he pulled it off." He's like, "It was amazing to watch him work." But yeah, he was very complimentary and very happy to recognize the level of, I don't know if it's complexity or what, but just how hard you worked and how hard the music was to perform and that you did it. So I can't wait to hear it.
That was the most complicated music I've ever had to work on. It quite literally. And then on top of that, he wanted several versions of like each section. So there was a lot of, playing under direction. Even though I'd been woodshedding to him for a long time, it was just basically me in a room with the demo. And to have him there in the control room going, okay, now try this, okay, now try that, okay, now we're going to do this section, okay, so I was getting like, on some of those songs, there's one song on there that we spent 10 hours just tracking drums, and that
Whoa.
was that was with like one break for lunch and then back at it. And no kidding, 10 hours on one track that is like 6 minutes. So that's
Was
just
was it? I mean, I've been in the studio with some pretty demanding players, and like when I was much younger with Steve Vai, who would be like, the hi hat was late, and then he would rewind and, oh, that fill, the third tom stroke was a little bit off. Was it that, or was it just like, no, let's try this, let's try that? Like, what was going on? Is he that strict and disciplined about what he wants, or is it the quality of the creative process, or what?
he was definitely looking for options, but at the same time there were certain parts that were very specific. And to absorb the whole thing as a track and execute it without, this is one of the things that I always loved about Mr. Bungle was, I would listen to some of that stuff and go, there's no way that they went in there, rehearsed, and just did this out. That there's a lot of cut and paste going on here to get to there. And I've read interviews with them where they're like, yeah, that's how it is in the studio. By whatever means necessary is how you get it on tape. Now you got to learn it
Hmm.
after, once it's composed and it's on there. Hold on one second.
Yep.
Thing. No. So, composing is by any means necessary. If you
Mm,
have to use studio trickery, who cares? We're trying to get ideas across. We're not in there going, oh, this is only all live drums or whatever. It's like, dude, you're trying to be creative.
right.
Don't limit yourself. After the fact, absolutely learn how to execute that. But we're talking, he was writing pieces with very challenging drum lines that are all programmed. And so as you're listening to it, it's like, okay, this was clearly not written by a drummer. Like, I mean, first off, but I mean, that's one of the things that I've loved about the style of Secret Chiefs 3 is there's so many things that were alien to me as somebody with a background in American styles of music, everything that's based in, blues and rock, which, rock is blues based,
Hmm.
country, even most of the prog stuff that I was into until, fairly recently, like discovering Gentle Giant. That was a band that I always knew of, but I'd never really checked them out until doing my live streams. And I would get so many prog requests and people were sending me all kinds of stuff that I'm like, oh, wow, how have I not been listening to this already for years? Like this came
Yeah.
out when I was born and I still, I'm just now discovering it. Um, but that was part of it is he was writing these really complicated lines and then trying to learn it as being able to go in and just perform it in one take was like this isn't going to happen. Like I ended up having to say, look, this is going to have to be, by whatever means necessary. And he's like, absolutely, no problem. So we got in. I mean, there were tracks that we did where I was freaking on it. And that was, one of my favorite experiences was there's one it's pretty complicated. It's relatively slow for the first half of the song, but all very specific parts, lots of very specific orchestration going on, and I had it nailed for that whole first part. And when we did like the first take of it, um, I stopped and I'm waiting for, okay, you did this wrong or you did that wrong, and he comes over the talkback. He's like, Mike, I have no notes. I have no notes. You hit everything in there. I can't believe this is amazing. And I was like, oh man, okay.
That's so
But
cool.
the other track that I was telling you about,
Oh
that was
yeah.
like that, okay, we're gonna take this section and just work it. Okay, now give it to me this way. Now give it to me that way. Now try it with those instead of this. And so
Wow.
he was looking for options. But the track that you've got queued up now was very much more organic. Like I went in and I had a general idea. This is the jazziest thing that I've ever done.
Huh.
Um, it's the closest to jazz playing that I've ever done for anything. So
All right. Well, let's
um,
take a listen. Let me pull up the music here. All right. right, I'll leave it as an exercise to the listener to go check out that track. It's on Bandcamp. Let's see. I think I
Nice.
have the page pulled up here. Yeah,
And
so
that's
it
on upright bass, Tim Smolens from High Castle Teleorchestra and Stratosphere as well. So that was another really cool thing to get the chance to say I'm on a track with him as well. The Stratosphere was one of my favorites. Is I only got to see him one time, but man, did I love that band. Well, I
it's
still do.
it's funny because Carl King's music, he would make fun of a stratosphere, and I just immediately like it created this bias, this unconscious bias. So I never listened to a stratosphere. I still haven't. And so many people are like, "Have you listened to a stratosphere?" I was like, "No, I just haven't." But I didn't know that it was actually good music. I thought he was just making fun of this artist or something. So I got to give him a shot, and I will.
It's just to be, just to do something controversial, honestly, because I mean, but either way, they're a freak. They were a wonderful band. Absolutely worth checking out. Um, really,
That's
from
funny.
any of the stuff, they were amazing.
Well, I will check it out. And then speaking of checking out, Carl made me this T-shirt, so I have him to thank for this shirt and for introducing me to you many years ago. So thank you,
Yeah,
Carl. But this shirt is your sort of performance name or performer name, DemiseO. It's not really a band, right? It's
correct.
one
Yeah.
man act. Tell us about DemiseO and what people can find on Bandcamp from you.
Well, with you know, that basically, I wanted at some point to start trying to write stuff on my own, and that actually came from um, frustration of working with bands and all the band drama, dealing with different people. At one point, I decided that I was just, it felt like music really wasn't going to be a living for me at that point, and I was like, look, if I'm not going to stop doing this, but I'm at least going to do it for myself. So I started trying to write stuff on my own, and my first, you can see behind me here, is my first hard disk recorder back here,
Oh
an old
yeah.
BR1180. I started recording. Actually, I started recording before that with two cassette players, and I was literally, doing the stacked looping. I had a mixer. I had some Radio Shack microphones. I had a cheesy old Roland. I think a D5. I think is the keyboard. It's back there in a cabinet now. But I started just experimenting and writing stuff for myself, and um, what were mostly improvisational things, where I would be working with things until I felt like, okay, I need to hit record now, and just I would capture whatever that was. It did later become, much more direct experiments where I would have an idea in my head and go, okay, if it wasn't a specific musical idea, it was a methodological idea where I'd basically go, okay, I'm going to write this way, and that comes from the Immersion Composition Society, which I was following back in the MySpace days big time, and was just enamored with what all of those people were doing. I later ended up getting to work with, the first online lodge of the Immersion Composition Society, the Interoclef Lodge, and that really put me on, just for a few years. I was writing a lot of stuff that was very, I would call it experimental or ethereal, and just odd, and very infrequently does it actually involve any drumming. It's primarily, everything that I do, as under the name of DemiseO, is typically keyboards, guitars, iPad synthesizers, and all kinds of noises. From I've got a piano remnant that is just the harp portion. um, Very rusty old one. I have no idea how old it is, but I found it in an alleyway and brought it home and put wheels on it. So I like using a lot of found sounds, and I'm trying to make things with that are almost like, um, like dreams or nightmares, or just general vibes. And quite often it ends up being very mellow, or it ends up being somewhat psychotic. And every so often it'll end up being something like, some like spaghetti western soundtrack music or something like that. But it can be found on Bandcamp, or it's on SoundCloud as well. Although I think far more people use Bandcamp than SoundCloud anymore.
Yeah.
So
Any
yeah.
um any tracks you recommend uh for a final closer?
Um, wow, from
Yeah.
this most recent thing was really, that was kind of the result of this looper here. I got a this Boss RC 505, and I started experimenting with just what it could do. And in the process, I ended up making um, a rather interesting kind of deal. I got to find what are the what are the track names there, because I
Oh yeah, foreboding dread, internal hemorrhaging, pray for sanity, a brief respite, storm of wasps slash a second wave, uh, cardiac arrest, and on the astral plane.
and I would probably pick On the Astral Plane, because that's probably the least scary one out of all of that.
You're
I
on
mean,
Make Weird Music, Mike.
I mean, that whole thing is really, I mean, it's a reflection of the year that I had last year, which was full of family illness, dementia, cancer, heart attack, um, and ultimately the loss of my sister. And um, yeah, that last one, On the Astral Plane, that kind of represents my sister traveling on. So
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking all this time and sharing your Primus audition story with us and some good lessons on life. And I love that you're just living this life that you have dreamt of. And I think you're an inspiration to me. And I hope that you inspire other people who watch this, and obviously your students and other people who encounter you. So keep it up.
thank you so much for having me,
Yeah, of
and
course.
all your kind words.
No problem. All right. On the astral plane, here we go. That was